When I was 19, I spent the fall living with my uncle in Salem, Massachusetts. He owned a small old funeral home that had been in our family for 3 generations. The place always smelled faintly of formaldehyde and cold metal. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt like I wasn't alone, even when I was. My uncle was a quiet, strange man with very specific rules. Never answer the front door after midnight, always knock twice before entering the prep room, and, most importantly, never ever open the 3rd casket in the cold room. He didn't say it like a joke, it was a warning. His face went pale whenever he mentioned it. I thought it was just one of those creepy family traditions, but I nodded anyway. The cold room was used to store bodies before embalming. It was always kept locked and only my uncle had the key. Even he rarely went inside unless absolutely necessary. One night, about 3 weeks into my stay, my uncle was called out unexpectedly. Before leaving, he gripped my shoulder tightly and said, "Do not go into the cold room, no matter what you hear." That last part, "what you hear," sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean by hear?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just grabbed his coat and left. It was the first night I'd ever be alone in that building. I tried to distract myself with cleaning, sorting papers, and keeping the radio on low. But the place was old. Every gust of wind made the walls groan and the floors creak. Then came the knock, a soft, slow tap, around 1:30 a.m. I thought someone was at the front door, but when I checked, no one was there. Then it came again, louder this time, from the back of the hallway. The cold room. I froze, listening. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, like something was trying to get out, not in. My uncle's words echoed in my head. I backed away and shut myself in the office. But the silence that followed felt heavier than the sound. My curiosity was eating me alive. By 2:45 a.m., the knocking had stopped. I told myself I'd just check, not open anything, just make sure everything was fine. I took the spare keys from the hook, 2 brass keys, one for the front, one for the cold room. My hands were shaking as I walked down that narrow hallway. The air grew colder with every step. The lock clicked open. The metal door groaned. Inside, it was freezing. The fluorescent lights flickered weakly above 3 steel caskets lined up on rolling trays, all bolted shut. I stepped in carefully, avoiding the 3rd one. It looked older, dented, streaked with rust. No tag, no paperwork, completely unmarked. Then the 2nd casket rattled. I stumbled back, heart racing, but it went still. Against all sense, I leaned closer and pressed my ear to the cold metal. And I heard it. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing. Someone, or something, was inside. I bolted out of the room, slammed the door shut, and locked it tight. Whatever was in there didn't belong in this world. I sat in the office until sunrise, trembling at every sound. When my uncle returned, he saw the missing key immediately. He didn't yell. He just went straight to the cold room. I heard the door creak open, then a long, heavy sigh. When he came back, he looked older, like something had drained the life out of him. "I told you not to open it," he said quietly. "I didn't," I whispered. But I heard it breathing. He stared at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. "That's why I told you never to listen too long," he said. He poured himself a drink, something I'd never seen him do. His hand trembled slightly. "It doesn't want out," he continued. "It wants attention, and once you give it that, it follows." He told me the casket had arrived years ago by mistake. No paperwork, no name, no history. My grandfather, who ran the place back then, refused to send it back. He called it a special case. Not long after, strange things started happening. Lights flickered, rooms turned ice cold, voices whispered through vents. People stopped coming to the funeral home. Eventually, they locked the casket in the cold room, thinking the freezing air kept it quiet, dormant. But every so often it would knock, just to remind them it was still aware. I asked why they didn't destroy it. My uncle shook his head. "You can't bury what refuses the ground," he said. "Someone tried once, we found him collapsed beside it. eyes wide open, lips blue. By then I knew I was connected to it. I had heard it breathe. "You've already made it curious," my uncle warned. "Don't make it feel invited." That night, as I lay in the guest room upstairs, I heard it again. Not knocking, not breathing, whispering. It said my name. I didn't sleep a second. The next morning, my uncle told me I had to leave. "You opened a door in its direction," he said. "You let it know you're willing to hear. That's enough." He drove me to the bus station himself. We didn't speak the whole way. I didn't return to Salem for years. But wherever I moved, something followed. Blank envelopes in the mail. A photo of a casket half buried in snow. 3 knocks on my closet door at night. Always 3. Sometimes I'd see my breath fog in a warm room. Years later, my uncle died in his sleep. I went back for the funeral. After the service, I walked past the old family funeral home. The windows were boarded up, but one door hung slightly open. Inside, everything looked frozen in time, except the cold room. Its door was wide open. The casket was gone. The chain that once sealed it lay broken on the floor, and across the tiles were wet, bare footprints, too long to be human. On the desk, a single envelope, my name written on the front. I didn't read it. I burned it. And that night, as I drove out of Salem, I heard a whisper behind me. Closer this time, like it was sitting in the back seat. I used to help out at my uncle's funeral home in Seattle on weekends. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than most part-time jobs. The building had been there since the 1920s, tucked between a rusted auto shop and a boarded-up dry cleaner on Rainier Avenue. It always smelled cold and hollow. Dust, bleach, and something faintly sour that no amount of cleaning could ever remove. I remember the day the child's coffin arrived because the delivery driver already looked shaken before he even opened the truck. He kept glancing over his shoulder like someone might be watching from the alley. He handed my uncle the clipboard to sign without saying a single word. "That guy looked like he saw a ghost," my uncle muttered, forcing a small chuckle. But he didn't open the box right away. It was a small white coffin with silver trim, the kind you only ever see in movies and hope never to see in real life. We carried it into the cold room together. Even through my gloves, I could feel a strange chill radiating off it, colder than anything from the truck's refrigeration. The cold seemed to linger longer than it should have. My uncle stared at the lid for a long time. Then he said quietly, "We weren't expecting this one." The next hour passed in silence. There were no services scheduled that day, so the chapel light stayed off. The whole building felt more like a mausoleum than usual. I was in the prep room organizing supplies when I heard my uncle muttering under his breath. Rare for him. When I went to check, I found him flipping through our thick binder of death records and transport manifests. "No name," he muttered. "No request, no paperwork. This came from a dispatch center, not a family." I asked if we should call someone. He just shook his head slowly, like he was trying to figure out what step he'd missed. "No funeral home sends a body without notice. This doesn't happen." That evening, I stayed later than usual. My uncle asked me to lock up while he took a call in the embalming room. As I walked past the cold room, I felt something strange, like static in the air, heavy and charged, the way it feels right before a thunderstorm. I stared at the white coffin for a few seconds longer than I meant to, then pulled the door shut. The next morning, my uncle looked exhausted. When I asked if everything was all right, he didn't answer directly. "Do me a favor," he said. "Don't go in the cold room for a while." That wasn't normal. I'd cleaned that room dozens of times. His tone made me uneasy, but I nodded anyway. Around lunch, curiosity got the better of me. My uncle had left to meet someone at the coroner's office, and I had the place to myself. I hesitated at the cold room door, remembering his warning, but convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe just a paperwork mistake. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt wrong. Not just cold, wrong. The white coffin sat untouched in the center of the room. I didn't open it. I couldn't. But as I circled it, my breath visible in the air, I noticed 5 tiny fingerprints on the lid. Not dust, Not smudges. Frost. My heart started pounding. I backed out and locked the door without thinking. When my uncle returned, he took one look at my face and said, "You went in, didn't you?" I nodded. He sighed like a man carrying 100-pound weight. "I found the dispatch record," he said. "It was routed to us from a funeral home in Idaho, closed 8 years ago." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I hid in the storage room to see what he'd do after hours. Around 11 p.m., I heard him wheeling the coffin out. Under the soft yellow light of the prep table, he opened it slowly. He stood there for a long time. Then I heard him whisper, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." His voice cracked like he was holding back tears. A second later, every light in the hallway flickered once, just enough to make my stomach twist. I stayed frozen behind the storage room door. My uncle didn't move for a long time. Then he closed the lid quietly, like he was tucking in a child, wheeled the coffin back into the cold room, locked it with a key I'd never seen before, and walked out the back door without a word. I didn't sleep that night. All I could think about were the frost prints. The next morning, I confronted him. He told me what he'd seen. The coffin hadn't been sealed. Every casket we received was always sealed for transport, especially children's. It was protocol. But when he opened the lid expecting remains, he found something different. A small figure, pale and still. The body didn't look preserved. It looked fresh. Too fresh. The skin had color. The lips weren't blue. The eyes were slightly open. And sometimes, he added quietly, "I think they blinked." I told myself it had to be stress or hallucination, but then I remembered the frost prints and the static in the air. Days passed. We didn't talk about it again. Then one Thursday afternoon, a woman came in. No appointment, no call ahead. She wore an old wool coat and gloves despite the mild weather. Her voice was soft but firm. "I'm here for my daughter," she said. I asked for a name. She didn't give one. She just stared at me, waiting, like she expected me to remember her. I told her we had no scheduled services. But before I could finish, she said, "White coffin, silver edges. She's in the cold room." My stomach dropped. I went to find my uncle. His face went pale when I told him. "We didn't release a name," he whispered. "No one knows it's here." We walked back to the front together. The woman was gone. We checked the security footage. She was there walking in slowly, calmly, but there was no footage of her leaving, no doors opening, no motion on the porch. She just vanished. That night, my uncle moved the coffin into a back chamber and told me not to ask questions anymore. But I couldn't let it go. The next night, I snuck in after hours. I unlocked the back chamber and stepped inside. The air was colder than ever. The coffin sat in the center. I didn't plan to open it, but I had to. My fingers were numb as I lifted the lid inch by inch. It was empty. My breath fogged the air. The silence was heavy, like something watching me from below. Then I heard it. A soft creak, like weight shifting on old floorboards. Only the floor was cement. I stepped back. Every hair on my body stood straight up. 2 tiny footprints appeared in the frost on the floor just a few feet away. Then another, and another. I ran, slammed the door shut, locked it, and sprinted out of the building. I didn't go home. I just drove around all night, anywhere but there. When I finally called my uncle the next morning, he didn't sound surprised, just tired. "I've seen it too," he said. Lights turning off by themselves, voices in the vents, doors opening in the middle of the night. I asked him why he didn't get rid of it. "Because I don't think we can," he said. He told me he'd tried once, drove the coffin to the crematory himself. Halfway there, his brakes failed. The truck spun off the road. When they pulled it from the ditch, the back doors were wide open, but the coffin was gone. When he got back to the funeral home, it was sitting in the cold room again, untouched. That was the last time either of us tried to do anything about it. The coffin is still there, behind locked doors and double insulation. But we both know it doesn't matter. That child, and whatever she is, never needed the doors open to move. We just pretend she's not there now. Keep the lights on. Avoid that hallway when we're alone. I don't work there anymore. I left a few months after that night. My uncle still runs the place, but he doesn't speak much these days. Every now and then I get silent calls from him, just static. When I call back, he swears he never touched the phone. I haven't been back to that funeral home in over a year, but I still dream about it, about the cold room, about the footprints. Sometimes I dream I open the coffin again, and in this time she's awake. I took an internship at a small funeral home in Milwaukee last summer, one of the few places willing to hire someone with barely any experience. The building was an old brick place tucked between an empty car lot and a weathered Catholic church. Martin, the owner, was a quiet man with kind eyes and the kind of face that looked like it hadn't slept in years. On my first day, he gave me 2 rules. Respect the bodies. Never go into the basement. That second one struck me as oddly specific. He said it casually, but with a weight that made my stomach knot. I assumed it was just an insurance issue, but he didn't smile. The whole place smelled of roses and formaldehyde, a sticky scent that clung to my clothes and hair. Even when it was empty, the building felt watched. The cold room where we kept the bodies was too quiet, not peaceful quiet, but the kind that felt like someone was holding their breath. Martin did most of the embalming himself while I handled phone calls and setups. I didn't mind the stillness, at least until my second week. That's when I first heard the tapping. It was faint behind the back wall. Not pipes, not machines, just a steady tap, tap, tap like knuckles on wood. When I asked Martin about it, he said, "You'll hear things sometimes, don't answer them." That was it. No joke, no explanation. He just walked off. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. A few days later, I dropped my keycard near the cold room door and noticed a thin seam in the wall, not a crack. It was too straight, too intentional. When Martin went out for a smoke, I pressed on it. It clicked. A hidden panel shifted inward with a heavy, grinding sound. Behind it, a stairwell led straight down into blackness. No railing, no lights. Just rough concrete steps and air colder than anywhere else in the building. I froze, then shut it quickly, pretending I'd never seen it. But from that day on, the basement stayed in my head like it was waiting. The little things started adding up. The cold room locked, then unlocked again, even though only Martin and I had keys. Lights flickered in the prep room despite new bulbs. Martin always blamed the wiring. Then one evening I stayed late alone after a double service. While taking out the trash near the cold room, I heard it. Not machinery, but a slow, deliberate knocking. And under it, breathing. I backed away and left, without finishing my cleaning. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those stairs. The next morning, Martin was on edge. He kept checking the front door locks. "Did you touch the cold room door last night?" he asked. I lied. "No." He nodded, but his eyes said he didn't believe me. Later that day, I caught him standing at the hidden panel, hand on the wall, eyes closed. He didn't open it. He just stood there like a man bracing for a storm. That night I went back. I told myself I only needed a look, just to know. With a flashlight in one hand and my phone recording in my pocket, I opened the panel and went down the stairs one step at a time. The deeper I went, the colder it got. Not AC cold, but damp, cellar cold, like a place sealed off for decades. At the bottom was a concrete floor and a metal door with a heavy lock that looked newer than everything else. My fingers shook as I touched it. No sound from the other side. Only my breathing. I spotted a rusted crowbar leaning in the corner. With trembling hands, I jammed it into the lock. The seal broke with a sigh of stale air. I pushed the door open. The hinges creaked like thunder. Inside was a small room lined with rows of white plastic body bags, the kind used for storage. Some of them were moving. I blinked hard, sure it was a trick of the light. But no, one bag twitched, another shifted, and then came the whispering. "Help me," it said. The voice was faint, everywhere at once, muffled as though coming from the walls. My head spun. My legs refused to move. On the far side of the room was a single unopened bag. Unlike the others, it wasn't on a table. It lay crumpled on the ground as if it had been thrown there. I don't know why I walked toward it, I just did. The whispering stopped. I reached for the zipper. My fingers trembled. Inside was a child. Pale. Lifeless. Bruises ringed its neck like a dark necklace. There were no records of a child like this. No funeral papers, no file. Just a small slip of paper tucked beside the body. One word written on it, please. I left that night and never went back. But I still see that child's face in my dreams. I still hear that whisper when the wind blows just right. And I know Martin wasn't the only one who knew.